Well, it was an unthinkable crime. In June of 2001, a mother drowns her 5 young children in a bathtub, and then she calls the police. A Texas jury found Andrea Yates guilty of murder, rejecting her claim that she was insane when she killed her kids. Yates was sentenced to life in prison and will be eligible for parole in 40 years. There's a new book out about this disturbing case that has grabbed America's attention. In Are You There Alone? The Unspeakable Crime of Andrea Yates, author Suzanne O'Malley exposes the mystery of the horrifying crime and the legal drama that has been surrounding it. Good morning, Suzanne. Good to have you with us.
Good morning.
This is obviously a case that sort of struck to the heart of everyone who watched this unfolding as it was happening. But you claim that there was really so much that was overlooked in terms of her physical condition, her mental condition, and the court proceeding. Tell us a little bit about what you've discovered since you've been having these ongoing conversations with her while she's in prison.
It was inconceivable to me that as much media coverage, and I was there for the whole trial, it was a huge event. And we missed so much. We didn't get her diagnosis. You know, the diagnosis turns out to be bipolar, which used to be manic depressive. At trial, she was, you know, everything from schizophrenia, postpartum psychosis, postpartum depression. All of those two were active, but the underlying thing was bipolar, and that does not come out until this book, 2 years later.
So you say she was never properly diagnosed or treated until after she was in prison, right?
Right.
So how has that changed her? I mean, do you see a big difference in this woman as she's been diagnosed and medicated properly?
Well, what I see, and I corresponded with her. I haven't seen her in person. But what you see is the mania versus the depression. And it's very characteristic in her letters. You can kind of tell where she's at any given point. But I think one of the things, when I went to Texas from New York to cover the trial, I went to string Rusty Yates up because I thought he was, you know, a bad guy. And what I learned when I was there was that he was not. You know, 2,000 pages of medical records that I went through, you found nurses reporting every day he came to the hospital. Every day he brought 5 kids with him, brought flowers, spoon-fed his wife, got medications, gave them to her, dispensed them himself, and held down a job at NASA. You know,
right.
It's an amazing job. It was hard to hold myself up to that standard. And I think the NASA work, that he's a career NASA person, is why he handled this thing so comfortably.
Because he came out the next day and was able to talk. I mean, just watching him, I thought, how can this man even step in front of a camera after having lost 5 of his children? And we also all felt that maybe he could have been able to prevent it. He knew she was very, very sick.
Right. Well, there's a big issue of denial for all of us about mental illness. I mean, mental illness does not discriminate. And what I found was if it could happen to the Yates family, after investigating them, the Kennedys, Andrea's family, and the Yateses, as closely as I did, if it could happen to them, it could happen to anyone.
One of the most heartbreaking things that I saw in the book is that you said that she likes to remember and talk about her children.
She really does. And I have a child. She likes to correspond with me about what my son is up to. She likes to tell me about her children, her memories of her children. I think one of the reasons she corresponds with me and assisted me in this book is because she owed a great debt, she felt, to her husband and to her mother and her family for standing behind her.
So for people out there who say, you know, forget it, this woman murdered her 5 children, why should we have any sympathy for her? You say?
I say, well, the thing Rusty said to her, to Andrea Yates, was, she said, how can you forgive me? And he said, Andrea, what if I were driving a car with all of our 5 kids in it and I had a heart attack? And the car crashed, all the children were killed, I lived.
So he says,
would you blame me?
Right.
Would you blame me? And she said no. And she said, well, you have a brain illness.
All right. Suzanne O'Malley, thank you very much. It's a heart-wrenching story. The book is called Are You There Alone? We thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.